Welcome. My name is D.I.Griggs, and today my presentation is regarding the United States Colored Troops pension records of 1890. Throughout the presentation, I will use the term Usct or colored, as some of these soldiers were Native Americans, Pacific Islanders, and Asian men who also joined the United States Colored Troops. These men served in the Union Army during the last 2 years of the American Civil War from 1863 to 1865. The learning objectives for this presentation is to give you a brief history of the U.S. Colored Troops, how to determine if your ancestor was in the USCT, where to locate the USCT pension files, how to obtain copies of the pension files, which documents to review for the soldier's comments about his background, health, family, and witnesses, how to verify and to prove your information through other sources and records, as well as historical timelines. Listed below are items that can be found in a pension file. Not all of the files have the same information, but if they filed for a pension, these men had to answer a multitude of questions about themselves, when and where they were soldiers, undergo physical examinations, and have witnesses to testify about their disability or inability to work. The asterisk next to the pictures mean that many of them do not have personal pictures in their files, but their overall physical exams are graphic regarding their injuries and/or bodily problems. It could be a hernia, hemorrhoids, physical and mental status, genital descriptions and abnormalities, disease, and mental state. These are examples of two soldiers who fought in the United States Colored Troops. One is the picture of Private Lewis Martin's injuries, and they're obvious. He had to have amputations on both his arm and leg, and he received a disability discharge. The second picture is part of a doctor's physical exam of a soldier named John Moon. Inside the chart is the surgeon's certificate, which consists of the actual description of the physical examination of John's entire body. Anyone who filed for a disability or invalid application, as well as an increase in payments, had to undergo another doctor's examination. Knowing some of the history of the United States Colored Troops during the Civil War will help you know where to begin your search. The American Civil War lasted from 1861 to 1865. However, the U.S. Colored Troops weren't formed until the last 2 years of the Civil War from 1863 to 1865. Within 2 weeks after emancipation, on January 1, 1863, many blacks in various states volunteered for service. At first, many white groups were hesitant to have colored men as soldiers with guns. Two, they didn't believe that black men were brave enough, nor had the competence to become soldiers. Frederick Douglass appealed to President Lincoln and other sympathizers everywhere through speeches and in his newspaper on April 6, 1863, when he stated, "Once let the black man get up on his person the brass letters U.S., let him get an eagle on his button, and a musket on his shoulder, and bullets in his pocket, and there is no power on the earth or under the earth that can deny that he has earned the right to citizenship." This is also a good time for whoever is researching this to begin tracking timelines. Due to the demand and necessity for soldiers, the government relented and issued an order for blacks to join the Union Army. On May 22, 1863, General Order Number 143 was issued by the U.S. War Department to establish the Bureau of Colored Troops, also known as the USCT. This is a copy of the General Order. Frederick Douglass was instrumental in recruiting free and freedmen for the United States colored troops. His sons, Charles and Louis, also enlisted in the regiment for the 54th Massachusetts Infantry. A significant battle for this regiment was the assault on Fort Wagner on July 18, 1863. Many black soldiers were killed along with their commander, Colonel Robert Shaw. Louis Douglas was also injured in this battle, as you can see on his enlistment card, yet it proved to everyone that black men were brave enough to fight as soldiers. Notice the name on the flyer underneath Colonel Robert G. Shaw, and the battle that was the same regiment portrayed in the movie Glory, with Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and Matthew Broderick as Commander Shaw. The colored regiments consisted of light and heavy artillery, cavalry, and infantry. All were divided into various companies and duties. However, most were used for minor skirmishes rather than major battles, and many of the colored soldiers were used as supply men, cooks, guarding the forts, and prisoners of war. Others were assigned the duty of retrieving and burying the dead. However, there was a payment discrepancy between the white and black soldiers. White soldiers were paid $13 a month. That included a clothing allowance of $3. Black soldiers were paid $10 a month, with a $3 clothing allowance subtracted from their pay, so they only cleared $7 per month. Many of the colored soldiers refused their pay allotment until they were paid the same as white soldiers. Some were brought up on charges for refusing to take their pay allotment. Again, Frederick Douglass and others approached President Lincoln regarding the unequal pay between the white soldiers and the colored soldiers. Frederick Douglass wrote in his newspaper in August 1863, "Is he not a man? Can he not wield a sword, fire a gun, march and countermarch, and obey others like any other?" One major battle with the colored soldiers occurred at Fort Pillow in Henning, Tennessee. 1,500 Confederate soldiers, led by General Nathan Bedford Forrest, attacked 567 Union soldiers at the fort and slaughtered almost 200 of the black soldiers, even after the Union commanders surrendered. The Confederates intentionally murdered the colored troops and their white officers. Confederates and Union soldiers who had escaped the trauma of the carnage reported it all across the country. This massacre reinforced black and white Union soldiers from then on with the battle cry, "Remember Fort Pillow." Still, it wasn't until 18 months after the inclusion of the colored troops into the Union Army before Congress approved equal pay for black soldiers, which was on September 28, 1864. Some soldiers received back pay as long as they were still soldiers and in good standing. Although most of the colored troops couldn't rise in rank as their white officers, they could as chaplains like Hiram Rhodes Revels. Revels was born free and could vote before slaves were emancipated. He was also a barber, minister, and was arrested once for preaching to slaves. He recruited 2 regiments for the colored troops, which he also joined and was stationed in Vicksburg. After the war, he became an alderman for the city of Natchez, Mississippi, and a pastor. Then he was voted into office as the first black U.S. Senator from Mississippi. Congress tried not to seat him, but he was finally admitted since he had been a free man all of his life and had voted before the war. Number 2 was Sias Bowles, a white minister from Minnesota. He joined the Union Army in 1864 and also was stationed in Natchez, Mississippi. He was assigned to the 6th Heavy Artillery, Company S. He wrote a letter to his wife letting her know about the black soldiers and how much they liked him. This letter is in possession of his great-great-granddaughter. He too applied for and received a pension in 1888. Now examine how to look up pension files for the colored soldiers. The ones we'll examine were stationed at Fort McPherson in Natchez as well as Vicksburg, Mississippi, and one from Louisiana. But first things first. Do you know who you're looking for? Have you researched your basic genealogy? Do you know the names of your great-grandfathers who lived at the time of the Civil War? Did they have any male siblings, uncles, male cousins, or brother-in-laws who might have served? Do you need to search each one to verify if they were in the colored troops or any other military during the Civil War, like the soldiers or Navy? Once you determine or know of an ancestor who might have joined the colored troops, check for him or them on the U.S. Civil War Pension File Index, General Index to Pension Files. There are also in your handouts websites that you can check for information regarding your colored troops ancestor. One is the African American Civil War Memorial Museum that has a search feature as well as access to the National Park Service searchable database of soldiers and sailors during the Civil War. For some reason, the U.S. colored troops are listed among the names of the states rather than by name. Browse the last name first. Number 3, the U.S. Civil War Pension Index. It's a general index to pension files from 1861 to 1934. There are also case files of approved pension applications of veterans who served in the Army and Navy, mainly in the Civil War and the War with Spain, and it's called Civil War and Later Survivors Certificates. Also, Ancestry.com, you can search it even though you have to pay a monthly fee, and Fold 3. Some are digitized, but most aren't, and Fold 3 also costs to join. The original colored troops pension files are located at the National Archives Research and Administration in Washington, D.C., and it's also called NARA. You may order copies from NARA online or in person, but if you do in person, it's by appointment only in advance. The archives also has an online list of independent researchers who, for a fee, will go to NARA and access and copy your files and mail or email them to you. The files you want to explore involve the Dependent and Disability Pension Act of June 1890. This act provided pensions for all veterans who had served at least 90 days in the Union military or naval forces, who were honorably discharged from service and were unable to perform manual labor regardless of their financial situation or when the disability occurred. The Pension Dependent Act of 1890 also extended benefits to widows who could prove that they were married to honorably discharged veterans. Men and women filed under this act, even though many were rejected for various reasons. Still, there is a pension application filed for them. Those requests have valuable information. The requirements to order an invalid disability pension file: you must have the application number and/or the certificate number and the state where he was living when he filed. If he died during the war, a spouse or his widow or children would also be on the pension card, the date, state, and their own application number once they file. The name of the attorney or agent is also on the card. It's prudent to check all websites listed to validate or disprove the actual person. Example, many have the same name or an alias and various spellings of their name, such as Levi can be spelled Levi or Levy. The company might be different, and the regiment he served in, the date that he originally filed, and his race. The appropriate information from the pension card must be given to request a file. As you can see, the name, unit, state, application number, and dates filed. It is a template that I created that is in your handouts. I use this to locate the files for these particular individuals. Most of them with a certificate means that there is an actual pension file, and those without a certificate number, it was either closed, canceled, or no further research on it. I requested these files 2 months ahead of time before I went to NARA. Then I made the appointment for the week I would be in DC. Otherwise, it would cost about $80 each and a wait time of at least 6 to 9 months to get them. Now let's examine a pension file for Levi Hunt by listening what he has to say about himself.
My name is Levi Hunt. I was born on Lansdowne Plantation in Jefferson County, Mississippi. It weren't too far from Rodney, Mississippi. My former master, Dunbar Hunt, informed me that my birth was about 1840, the same as his. I found out much later I was really born in 1842. I was a field hand on the plantation, but just right after emancipation in 1863, they allowed us colored men to join up in the Union Army. After the siege of Vicksburg in July 1863, I says to myself, Levi, you a free man now, so it's best to go join up with the other colored men. One fine hot day in August, it felt good to me to leave. So I left the plantation to join the new colored troops at Fort McPherson in Natchez, Mississippi. I was assigned to the 58th Regiment in Company I. I now live in Gum Ridge, Mississippi, still in Jefferson County, at 50 years old in 1891. I filed for my soldier's pension due to it being too hard for me to work with my hernia and heart conditions. I took some time, but they know that I discharged honorably. I got my pension in early 1895 at the goodly rate of $12 per month.
For Levi's records, I used my subscription on Ancestry.com to locate the military service records. Although the copy of the pension card wasn't present on the site, his information was there. Additionally, there were many other records for him listed to the right of the web page, and that's where I clicked on his enlistment card for this information. Notice the clues on it: occupation, birthplace, city, description of him, marital status, and his former owner. When a record isn't there, look on the other websites that we mentioned before. Although Family Search is free, you must join Fold 3 to view the pension itself. Not all pensions are digitized yet, and it's costly to see whether or not the pension documents are there, although Fold 3 does have a 7-day trial period. From the clues on the card, Levi was from Jefferson County, Mississippi. To find him, I could search for him on the 1890 special schedule of surviving soldiers, sailors, Marine, and widows for Jefferson County, Mississippi. The 1890 schedule is about the only census left of 1890, and it's there on the right-hand side of your screen. If you want to know more about Levi and his family, I would also search census records for 1870, 1880, 1900, and 1910 in order to fill in my timeline about his life. These are the facts from Levi Hunt's pension files. Once I received his pension file, this is the actual information that I found in it. This template that I use is in your handouts, so you can record the information from your files once you have them. It mentioned in his file that Dunbar Hunt was his former enslaver. So I found in Levi's file a letter from his former enslaver to verify his age. He also included Levi's parents' names, the name of the plantation that Levi was born on, the plantation that the enslaver lived on, and who were his parents. When Levi left and who he left with, Dave Netter. All of these are excellent clues. However, I never did find Dave Netter anywhere in any files or census records for Mississippi. There are discrepancies not only in the files but in other sources. In checking the census records for Levi's parents, Jackson and Viney, I found them under the name of Johnson. It's possible that they changed their names or used their birth surname after emancipation. Levi states on this census and other census that his father was born in Baltimore and his mother was born in Mississippi. However, this couple, Jackson and Viney, also have a son named Levi, but his last name is Johnson as well. The soldier Levi is living in a home 1 or 2 places away from them. His former enslaver was mistaken, forgot, or just didn't care. Maybe those are Levi's children living with his parents, as his mother or stepmother is too old to have children at that age. Levi was in his 50s and the Levi Johnson was in his 20s. Other documents that I found on Levi was his death notice and burial cards from other resources. They identify when Levi died, where he died, and exactly where he is buried in the Natchez National Cemetery. These are also records from the Natchez National Cemetery. These records verify his date and location of his tombstone. The tombstone picture was taken from findagrave.com. This record is of Peter Hunt, my ancestor, who was in the 6th Heavy Artillery in Natchez, Mississippi. Peter Hunt wasn't related to Levi Hunt nor enslaved by the same family. Peter was originally from Liberty, Amite County, Mississippi, prior to being relocated before the war to Franklin County, Mississippi by his enslaver, Captain Henry Hunt, also his father. Peter was my second great uncle. In Peter Hunt's descriptions, there are also discrepancies. You will find them in almost every file, and you just have to sort them out. It seems that most colored troops enlistees were described as black, no taller than 5'5" or 5'6", but as you can see from this picture, that Peter looks mixed. The card on the right-hand side states that he's mulatto, 5'10", and could readily pass as a white man, whereas on the card on the left, he's only 16, 5'5", and black. One thing that I hadn't noticed before was the promotion of Peter from a private to a corporal to a sergeant, and then for garrison duty. Prior to becoming a second corporal, Peter was in the hospital for 1 month with the measles. Fortunately, he was one of a very few men who didn't die from the measles. In the pension files, always look for the claimant's declaration. It is his personal testimony. Here, Peter lists the names of his wives. He was married 3 times, divorced, and separated, and that he only had 1 son, Albert, by his first wife, Emily. Note, I had information about his 3rd wife, Rebecca, for 10 years before I realized who she was. I traveled to Mississippi to meet her great niece, Flora, and we exchanged pictures of Peter and Rebecca. She told me all she knew about their ancestors and the town's history. Flora also took me to the extinct town where Rebecca's ancestors once lived, including the old church and current cemetery. The city is now defunct. She advised me how I was related to her as well. Also on the claimant's statement, Peter declares how he became disabled and how it was from the worsening disabilities that he suffered from the measles that he contracted after he enlisted in the Army. Several other young men from his former plantation who caught the measles died from it. He also states that according to his mother, his father was old Captain Henry Hunt, their former enslaver. America was 24 years old when Peter was born, and Captain Hunt was 51 years old. We're also adding all of this information to the personal timeline. In Peter's file, one of the witness statements was his white half-brother, Henry Fitzmaurice Hunt. He stated he personally appeared before the Justice of the Peace. He was 77 years old. He declares that to the best of his knowledge, Peter was born in August 1844. Peter's mother, America, was owned by his parents and lived on their plantation in Emmett County in the state of Mississippi. It took a couple of years and research before I discovered that the other men who were witnesses in the file happened to be Peter's brother-in-laws. I also located the 1865 Registry of Freedmen living on the plantation of Henry Hunt in Franklin County, Mississippi, where it lists Peter's mother, America, his sisters, but Peter isn't on the list. That's because he's still stationed at Fort McPherson in Natchez until 1866. Peter, too, is listed on the 1890 census for Franklin County, Mississippi, like Levi was in Jefferson County. Peter's death certificate verifies his mother was named America Hunt and his son Albert was the informant. There were several pension applications that were rejected for assorted reasons as follows. 1. Dishonorable discharge. 2. Desertion. 3. Fraudulent claims. Pretending to be a widow or a parent. Filing for a man who never served in the colored troops. Parents that died prior to the war. And the soldier or his spouse couldn't prove the marriage, or they remarried but became a widow again. Minors who were not the soldier's children nor young enough to be a dependent. Adult siblings claiming reliance on the soldier's pension. Family infighting. Claims by others for service rendered to the soldier, such as an agent, attorney, a doctor, or someone who was a caretaker. Fraud by agents or military disbursement officials. We'll now examine a few of the rejected claims that I had asked for at NARA before I got there. We'll look at a pension file for Nelson Mason. He was in the 63rd Heavy Artillery, Company H, from November 1863 to 1866. And it's a description of his unit there. Nelson was dishonorably discharged after being in the colored troops for over a year. He was absent for duty on April 30th, 1865 because he was in the military prison, and he was sentenced there on April 27, 1865. He was dishonorably discharged on May 16, 1865 by sentence in Natchez, Mississippi at Fort McPherson. Still, he applied for a pension in 1890 because he said that he had rheumatism and was sick in the head, but he was denied the pension. It was hard to read, but it was either for insolence, being rude, or indolence, being lazy. We'll now take a look at Wesley Hunt, who was in the 6th Heavy Artillery, Company C in Natchez, Mississippi, and see why his claim was rejected. The Secretary of War stated that even though Wesley Hunt was in the hospital in Vidalia, Louisiana, a mere 5 miles from Natchez, that's where he died. He was considered a deserter because he wasn't on duty in April of '64. He had the measles and dysentery, so his mother's application for a pension was denied. His parents were Lucy and Jerry Hunt, and they lived in Natchez. Jerry was still living but completely blind. His mother was blind in one eye and the other one was defective. The charge of desertion would not be removed upon the mere showing of the record, the Secretary of War wrote in March 1890, even though he was still a soldier and it was their error. This is a record to show you that many men had the same name. This Peter Hunt was not my uncle. He was in the 8th Infantry in Company I, and he only served a little over 1 month. This is an example of a fraudulent claim. Clara Frazier filed for a pension as the mother of Peter Hunt, who served in the 8th Infantry from May 1, 1863 to when he died June 11, 1863 in Lake Providence, Louisiana. Attached is a letter by his brother, Richard Hunt. The synopsis states that his brother Peter Hunt had never been married in his life, that he has no widow, and that he's satisfied that their mother died before the war. However, this letter isn't written until 1913, so they're concerned about all this back payment that this woman possibly received, and the brothers thought they should receive it and wanted it right away. However, this is a copy of the letter that was sent to Clara Frazier and Richard Hunt, rejecting their claims by the War Department. So neither one of them received any monies for the death of this Peter Hunt. 2. As I mentioned before, there are documents online for anyone to research about the fraudulent claims from attorneys as well as the military. And those websites are included in your handouts where you can go and read these 2 articles online. Now we'll take a look at a man, Milton Hunt, who enlisted under an alias name during his time in the colored troops. He was in the 58th Heavy Artillery, Company C, and also stationed in Natchez. Even after Milton received his pension and was living with one son, the Army received an anonymous letter accusing the family caretaker of fraud, and it was written in 1939. The synopsis is a few lines to let you know that Milton Hunt, who was disabled on May 5, 1932, which was incorrect, and unable to attend to any business at all. His son, Luther Dink Hunt, has run through with the biggest of his money. Why Milton doesn't know it when his drawing time comes. Now you all will have to look after Milton's money, for it don't do him any good at all. He's been getting $72 a month. Milton's original pension monies began at $8 per month in 1890. He suffered rheumatism after being exposed to the cold and winter elements during the war, like so many USC colored troops did. However, $72 in 1939 is equal to a little over $1,500 today. So someone else, and they both identified another son as the one who wrote this anonymous letter. Still, they had to go through a lot of checking to be sure that his money was getting to him. In the investigation, the Treasury Department had to interrogate all those who had anything to do with Milton receiving his check, such as the post office where it came in, the bank where he cashed it, everyone who had outstanding debts that he had to pay, as well as his caretaker. As you can see, the white witnesses were giving a higher rating of believability. Once Milton died, you can see on his death certificate that it lists both his parents' name, including his mother's maiden name. Sometimes that's not always there. With such an unusual maiden name, it's possible that her father was also her owner. Many didn't even know either parent's names. Now we'll look at the faces in the life of a colored soldier, William Layton Hammond, and his wife and subsequent widow, Amelia Hammonds. When he died in February 1913, she went ahead and filed right after he died and received her pension as well. Now let's hear from her what she has to state about her husband and their life.
My name is Amelia Hammonds, but my husband called me Amelia. My husband was William Layton Hammonds, but pert near everyone around here called him Uncle Bill. I called him Layton. He joined the colored troops before we met, and he was a soldier in Vicksburg in the 57 Colored Troops Infantry. We met in Natchez after the war and was married in 1869 by a white preacher, and we got proof. I had 3 small children, and when we married and together, we had 5 more children. We was farmers. Neither one of us knew our parents. He was passed off to several folks over in Warren County, and I was Kentuck before we came to Natchez. No, sir, neither one of us could read or write, but we got along well till we got old and couldn't farm no more. During the war, Layton was shot in the butt, but it was an accident. And not from fighting in the war. This was part of the reason he filed for his pension in 1898. He was somewhere around 65 years of age. He couldn't work or hardly walk no more. Thankfully, in 1890, the government allowed men and their widows to file for pensions if they're loyal, served in the war, and couldn't work no more. Layton got his pension, and when he died in February 1913, he was 80 years old, and I was 78. I was able to file for my pension the following month and got it, my widow's pension. Sure helps now that my husband's dead.
As stated, they were married in 1869 after the end of the war. No, they didn't know their parents' names for anyone to place on their death certificates. And I also filed for a copy of their death certificates since it was after 1912 in Mississippi, and received them both. They both were illiterate, yet had a piece of land in Louisiana that they never homesteaded. Tragically, he sold it for $1 1 month before his death. There were also soldiers of the colored troops who were awarded the Medal of Honor for their bravery while in the Army or Navy. Some were not awarded it until long after their death, and this is also a list that you can find online. In giving honor to whom honor is due, as well as the African American Civil War Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. It was founded by its director, Dr. Frank Smith. This sculpture stands in honor of the brave and heroic U.S. colored troops. The names of the Army, Navy, and white officers are etched onto stainless steel panels on its memorial wall. The 10-foot sculpture, The Spirit of Freedom, is made of bronze, sits on a granite engraved plaza. Descendants of the colored troops are welcome to join their Facebook page and share information about their colored soldier ancestor and participate in their services online and in Washington, D.C. At the conclusion of the war, 175 colored regiments had been created. They consisted of well over 180,000 soldiers and 19,000 naval men. Even though the colored troops made up 1/10 of the Union Army, roughly 40,000 soldiers died from infections and diseases, which was approximately 33% higher than the white Union troops. After the war, many of the colored troops became Buffalo Soldiers. Remember, we should always celebrate the United States Colored Troop soldiers for their service and sacrifice. What should be our call to action? 1. Talk to family members to identify all surnames of ancestors. 2. Search the Usct databases from the National Park Service, Ancestry.com, FamilySearch.org, and Full3.com. 3. Prepare the Usct soldiers' information to order copies of their pension file. 4. Order online through NARA, or hire an independent researcher, or make an appointment to go to NARA in Washington, D.C. and take the necessary equipment. You'll need a scanner, a computer, your iPhone, and several USBs. Also, the History Hub will allow you to scan your pension file, and they will give you a copy on a USB. 5. Accept ancestors' decisions regarding enlisting and or deserting the military. They could have left due to death in the family, disease, uncleanliness of the camps, their families suffering due to their absence, or they left when their families had to leave the camps nearby and just maybe possibly to die at home. 6. Try to obtain their picture. 7. Keep a framed picture of your ancestor or a copy of a Usct picture in a prominent place in your home as a reminder for you and your family that these men mattered and they still do. 8. Share with your family and post on other websites like the Natchez U.S. Colored Troops Monument Committee online and Facebook, and or create or share to a website about them. Examples being Descendants of Natchez Usct, Stories of the United States Colored Troops, the African American Memorial Monument website, or your ancestors' state archives. I want to thank the voices of the Colored Troops reenactors. Levi Hunt was by Roosevelt Friday, and Amelia Hammond was by his wife, Minnie Robinson Friday. As this presentation ends, let us remember to celebrate all soldiers in the United States Colored Troops for their service and sacrifice for our freedom. Thank you.